Welcome to the Mad in America podcast, your source for science, psychiatry, and social justice. Hello, this is James, and welcome to the Mad in America podcast. And this week we turn our attention to the transformative power of nature-based therapeutic mentoring, and joining us to talk about this is Peter Mayfield. Peter is the founder and executive director of Gateway Mountain Center, a youth development organization innovating how youth learn, heal, and thrive. He has enjoyed a 40-year career guiding people into mountain experiences and being an entrepreneur and embodied peak experience. He has traversed a trajectory from world-class climber to chief guide of the Yosemite Mountaineering School to founder of City Rock, the first full-service climbing gym in the world. Today, Peter is passionate about changing the system of care for youth suffering from serious emotional disturbance and complex trauma. Gateway's program, Whole Hearts, Minds and Bodies, is the first nature-based therapeutic program to achieve full-service partner contracts with county behavioral health departments and certification as a Medi-Cal provider. I was curious to ask Peter about his journey from mountaineering to his role as an educator and mentor, and how enabling children and adolescents to connect with nature has such a profound effect on their health and well-being. Peter, welcome. Thank you so much for making the time to chat with me for the Mad in America podcast. I'm thrilled to get to talk to you. And to kind of start with, to kind of introduce you to the listeners, I wondered what it was that took somebody from being a, world championship climber to, now you're involved with kind of outdoor pursuits and therapy and nature and well-being. So, how did that transition happen?
Oh, well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be part of this community. I've learned a lot from the whole Mad in America community and effort. So very glad to be here. Well, I started my lifetime love affair with mountains at an early age, and I started teaching climbing at an early age. I was 15 years old as a certified climbing leader for the Sierra Club, and it started with just this really intense feeling of the contrast. Every weekend I would be facilitating a transformational experience for people in the mountains, leading a climbing outing. And then I would come back to being a high school student in San Francisco and have to take physical education class. And I just found the contrast so huge. It's like this sport is truly changing people. It's breaking open their hearts, minds, and connecting their bodies to their hearts and minds. And then Monday morning I would be there and some coach would be barking at me to, run laps and do push-ups. And I just felt such a rich potential in embodied experience in nature. And we needed to evolve physical education. So I thought I would study that. I went to a really high-end prep school, and in my college counseling, I was telling people I want to do something to transform physical education in America because I felt like it was ridiculous. So over the years, I went right into guiding. I worked at the largest climbing school in America, the Yosemite Mountaineering School, and I was chief guide there. And so, yes, I had a good career as a successful climber, but I was teaching and guiding the whole time. What rock climbing does, it's this instantly deep immersion into a flow state. And it's somewhat unique as an activity because that happens even with the first step off the ground for a beginner. In any sport, once you have enough hours to get toward mastery, a successful participant learns how to drop into that flow state, that present moment experience where you're just being, you're not ruminating and thinking and pondering, you're just in the moment. And that's very powerful. And so many activities that have been well researched to be therapeutic, yoga, mindfulness, somatic experiencing, all these things help people physically drop into that flow state. So I got to do it in so many different contexts with, corporate leadership contexts, with military training groups, with and increasingly with youth with issues. My first business 30 years ago was really the first large climbing gym, and it was the first full service rock climbing gym ever done. And we had all sorts of groups from the Adolescent Drug Treatment Center would come in. I worked with a group that was supporting homeless teens and recovering from heroin. And we just saw how this type of experience really worked. It really improved their sense of self, their self-efficacy, their self-awareness. And it's been a long time engagement with these ideas and these practices, starting at a young age. But it's just been a life work, very continuous.
Fantastic. And I wondered if you could say you founded the Gateway Mountain Center. So I wanted to ask kind of, how that kind of helps support children and adolescents, particularly with perhaps struggles with mental health issues. And when you set it up, was that kind of your prime drive, was to get into helping people with wellness and with a kind of nature therapy orientation, or was it more simple and it was really a question of a kind of nature outreach thing that developed into an approach for mental health and well-being?
Yeah, it was the latter. It was it started. We did initially start with two specific areas of work. We had visiting school groups. So we're pretty close to a large population center of the San Francisco Bay Area, but we're up at the Sierra Crest on the high point on the way to Lake Tahoe. So we're at an elevation of 7,100 feet. Spectacular location, just glorious and beautiful and rugged, very rugged. We're on the granite of the Sierra Crest. And we partner with the Sierra Club. So we have the Sierra Club Lodge at our disposal, and we can house 145 youth. So we started with field trips. So groups of students, 6th grade through high school, would come up with their teachers and stay with us for 3 or 4 days, doing field science, mountain adventure. Increasingly, we do social emotional skill building, resilience building through the mountain adventure. So we started with that. But at the same time, we started doing programming for the alternative education sites in our communities. So we have a continuation high school and a what's called a community school, which used to be called a probation school. So definitely some youth who've had struggles and involvement with law enforcement. So we started those two programs at the same time. And after a few years, that was 13 years ago, and we started doing the specific therapeutic work 8 years ago. And that grew out of really on a couple of fronts. On the school visiting field trip programs, we really noticed an increasing number of youth who were on medication. So we get their medical forms, and we do summer camps. And so those kids are really left in our care for 7 days straight. And, the moms are loading us up with all the pill bottles. Like, okay, they're taking this and they're taking that and they're taking this to counteract that. And don't forget this, or they'll be, and we saw that. And the other fascinating thing on that end, a lot of, in the United States, there's this, I would say, egregious increase in kids diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And it is fascinating how many of those kids do find their way to the sport of rock climbing. So our rock climbing camps, after a couple of years, we were seeing like half our kids are on these medications. And this is interesting. And I had some reflection for myself personally, finding the sport of rock climbing. In the 70s, the diagnosis wasn't so, I just got to be a creative, energetic kid, and I wasn't labeled with any label. But rock climbing was an amazing outlet for me. So we started thinking we should maybe have focused programs to support these kids. They're finding us naturally. So that was on the probably, I would say, like upper income level of population we work with. On the other end, we're working in this probation school, and we're seeing kids with serious emotional disturbance, working with the county system. So, low-income kids in our country, we call it, Medicaid. In California, it's Medi-Cal is the federal Medicaid specific for our state. And just how they related to the system of care. And that was really disturbing to us. Like a kid depressed, suicidal, coming from a serious adverse childhood background, very challenging home life. And just seeing how long it took for them to get to a therapist, or, just this sporadic access to psychiatry, the unskillful application of medication. So we were seeing all of that. And in our state system, there's a nice funding stream for mental health treatment called the Mental Health Service Act in California. And about 9 years ago, they put a lot of emphasis on innovation. They were doling out funds to spur experiments, to support people trying new things. Explicitly, these monies could not be used for the existing system of care. So we were invited for our innovative work in the alternative ed system, and the county invited us into this process. Actually, Robert Whitaker's book had a big influence on me. I happened to pick it up and read it right before those requests for proposals came out. And I had already had a strong opinion about the ineffective mental health treatments in the United States for youth, and was offered to apply for this funding, and read that book and matched that to my own experience, and we were off and running. What we didn't anticipate was that our initial program, we named it, we described it, Whole Hearts, Minds, and Bodies, Nature-Based Therapeutic Mentoring. What we didn't anticipate is that we would initially be given referrals to support some of the highest need youth in our community. So kids who had multiple suicide attempts, multiple psychiatric hospitalizations. They could be said to be frequent flyers of the 5150. That's the term for when a kid gets committed to a psychiatric facility for 5 to 7 days. And basically these school psychologists were saying that nothing else has worked. You're piloting this program. Why don't you try with this kid? And we had some spectacular early success. And that led us really rapidly to where we are today. We went from a funded experiment to full service partnership with a large county in about 18 months, which is just unheard of. We signed a contract before we even had an office. We were still running it out of a spare room in my house. So that's the genesis of our program, but it has really taken off. And we are getting a lot of attention now as the nature as medicine movement is really growing. We are, as far as we can tell, the first nature-based therapeutic program that is getting Medicaid reimbursement and these government contracts. So in a sense, infiltrated the system of care to try to change it from within. We're partnered with the School of Psychiatry at UC Davis. So the fourth-year residents have us as an elective rotation. So good on them, that they're looking at the future, and they want. We only have one at a time. It's not like a huge volume, but this psychiatrist is picking a kid up from school and spending 3 hours with him. He's got an older out of school kid, so he does 2 sessions in a day on Thursdays, and then he's available to give parents some free counseling about medication. But he's totally joining our mission of like, this should be a shorter term thing and a more skillfully applied thing. And so we're trying to change the system by relating to the system to change it.
Absolutely. Well, it's certainly looking at the website and reading your information, it seems pretty unique to me, and certainly far more in depth than just an outward bound type nature approach. And I was staggered really at the range of issues and areas that you address. So, including mindfulness-based response to substance abuse problems, observational and reflective exercises, anger management, and even didactic practices being at the core of teaching. So there's an awful lot there that you cover. So how did you go about kind of getting the skills and experience within the team to be able to cover such a wide range of interventions for kids that might be struggling?
It's a good question. An entrepreneur's primary role and the skill set to develop is hiring great people. So, yeah, we have a key partner, Nancy Minges, is a holistic health educator. We partnered with the Center for Adolescent Studies in Oakland, which is an amazing resource for trainings and certifications. And they developed MBSAT, which is mindfulness-based substance abuse treatment, which is now an evidence-based substance use treatment, very effective. Nothing to do with nature. We add that on, but it's a process that is much more empowering and respectful of the young person. We always meet in circles. The young people start leading the mindfulness practices themselves. and some very deep curriculum in learning about triggers, learning about family triggers. When is a friend become an accomplice? And a lot of rich curriculum. We've hired a number of licensed MFTs, and then we're actually a fantastic internship location for people working toward their licensure. And so some of these people, while they were in grad school, started working for us and bringing back their academic resources to inform all of us. So, yeah, I would just say we've hired well, and then really made an effort to stay connected to the very forefront of trauma treatment theory and practice. So I feel very committed to this Boston Trauma Center, and we're also looking at the Child Trauma Academy in Houston, the work of Dr. Bruce Perry. So those are kind of the two centers in the U.S. that we look at. Coming out of Houston, the neurosequential model of therapeutics really supports what we do, and all this work out of Boston under Dr. Vanderkolk is amazing and very supportive of the theories that we have developed, both being informed by these schools and being and what we see in practice to come up with our methods. So, yeah, I just would say, to answer your question, we've made a great effort to study and connect to what we feel is the best that is out there to develop our own package of method. One comment I want to make when you mention Outward Bound, we are not a wilderness therapy program. So kids are not sent away to attend our program. We are treating them where they are. We pick them up from their school, spend 3 hours with them, 3 or 4 hours in a session involving nature as much as we can, often buy them dinner and take them home, and then do it again next week. So our service delivery is in the same rhythm as somebody getting therapy, like with a weekly session. And it's very different. These kids are not banished away from their communities to come attend our program. And that's what wilderness therapy can be very effective, but we are not a wilderness therapy program. We are a nature-based therapeutic program that can be woven into the youth's life, normal life. They're still in their family, they're still in their school, they're still in their community. And that's the game-changing aspect of it. We often get a referral when a kid comes home from wilderness therapy, they need that support. And sometimes the huge contrast, means they need more support.
Yeah, absolutely. And something you said earlier made me think. You mentioned, Peter, that you get a lot of kids already pre-diagnosed and already on medication. So, if a kid comes to you and they kind of have already internalized, I'm broken and I have this diagnosis and I have a broken brain, or, do you challenge those things directly, or do you allow nature to kind of infiltrate the way that young person thinks about themselves?
Well, that's a great question. It takes a lot of skill. So I use the term infiltrated. So we support the family deeply, and we support the youth. And so, and I loved how you framed that question, because these kids, that is the context. They are diagnosed, they are medicated. They no matter how well-meaning the practitioners are, you're right, that child has this message that something is wrong with them. So some of it is educating the parents. We do have to do it skillfully, though, because we can't just, I could say personally, I have a huge critique, as does Mad in America, of how medication is used with children. And we have seen egregious examples, but I've also seen it be a useful intervention for a child to go to a doctor with their mom. And the placebo effect is so strong, that I have seen that work well. We're like, okay, they're told that this will help them regulate a little bit more and get through the school day a little bit easier. And it happens. And as research shows, it would often happen with a sugar pill in that context. But we've also seen, it horribly done. So we want to be part of a movement where medication would be used less often and for less duration and more skillfully. and we want to be part of that. But we can't be out, telling a parent they're crazy for putting their kids on medication. I do distribute an essay that is posted on your website from Dr. Sam Timimi. It's a fantastic essay for parents considering medication, and I quote from that we should look at it as a short-term intervention, and as if they broke their wrist and we put a cast on. The healing has to happen from within. So we hold that framework, and then we pour it on the healing from within and how to support that, and very strength-based. And sometimes I'll tell people, attention deficit disorder. We call it multiple attention ability, a familiar skill set in mountain guides and entrepreneurs to see the big picture and connect the dots. So we help kids find the strength-based framework, and that is the healing path. Like, our method is we call 4 roots for growing a human. And root number 1 is authentic relationship. And a core tenet of authentic relationship is that these kids come in and they've been given this messaging that they're broken, and we're going to fix you, or you need to change, or we're going to support this behavior change in you. And our framework is that here you are, and we're going to connect, and we're going to develop a real therapeutic bond. And in this, and we are not going to fix you. You have to fix yourself. You have to choose to change and grow, and that's up to you. It's all up to you. This relationship will be like a mirror where we hope that your self-awareness might grow. We're not literally saying this to a kid; it's just the framework. But how we hold it is that this therapeutic relationship can be like a mirror in which the youth grows their self-awareness. And with growing self-awareness, kids tend to start making decisions they don't regret. That's it. That's the framework. And the beauty of our method is with 3 hours of engaging, sharing outdoor experiences, that relationship goes deep compared to 50 minutes on a couch. And we collaborate with all sorts of therapists. We love therapists, and most of the therapists send the kids to us because they're like, this 10-year-old, severely dysregulating 10-year-old squirming on my couch, it's not going to be as effective as spending 3 hours with you guys. And often, we work as a team. So much of it is context. And if you talk about the level of government supported healthcare in the U.S., so kids on Medi-Cal in our community, I'll give you this stark example. The services are centered in a county building called the Joseph Center. And let's talk about a typical case we have. So maybe a youth who was exposed to drugs in utero and had a couple of foster placements, but now they're back with their family and their parents are sober, but they've been through a lot. And there's a 10-year-old, they're in 4th grade, and they're having all sorts of trouble in 4th grade. And so that mom, who's kind of stressed out, working 2 jobs, will take time off work and take her son to the Joseph Center. They go open the door. On the left is the court. On the right is the sheriff. You go up to the second floor, and there's child protective services and probation. You go to the 3rd floor, and there's a wonderful therapist in a windowless room. But just going up those stairs is like a re-traumatizing for the mom and the kid. And is that a healing context? Going past all the law enforcement, all the county agencies that have threatened to take the kid away or did take them away, and they go see a therapist. You contrast that to someone like myself picking that boy up from school with a kayak on my car. And he's like, "Hey, Peter, what are we doing today?" And I say, "Well, are you up for a challenge today?" And it's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, the wind is blowing so strong. I think if we can paddle up Donner Lake as far as we can, we could surf some waves on the way back." And he's like, "Cool, let's do it." And we stop and buy him a snack first, and we go do that. And then we're sitting on the beach a couple hours later, and he's really sharing some hard stuff that happened, and a fight he got into at school, and how he was suspended last week, or all sorts of drama, and therapy is happening. But what's also happening is he's developing this self-confidence, what we call going through embodied peak experience. Like, he was challenging his balance, paddling on the windy lake. And there's growing research that those inputs, that activation of the vestibular and the proprioceptive and the sensory motor, will strengthen his sense of self, and that is actual healing. The medication he's on might keep him a little bit calmer. It's not going to heal him. This type of work will heal him. He will grow self-confidence, self-efficacy, self-awareness, and the relational experience. He has an adult who is really there for him, kind of a mentor, a coach, telling him the truth, but also there in support. And for a kid who's had a lot of emotional disturbance and family instability, that is key. That is, human beings need that. So that just to illustrate kind of the contrast between the existing system of care and what we do.
I recognize that myself. We aim to provide safe spaces for therapy, but quite often the environment that we give therapy in doesn't feel particularly safe. Whereas to take someone out into nature, and be with someone that's experienced and knows what they're doing, it is inherently much more open, isn't it? Rather than sitting in a closed room and, being scared by that experience. And I loved reading, you mentioned in some of your kind of, in some of your successes that, very quickly a child will out in with you in the wilds will start to walk differently. They'll start to carry themselves differently, and that was such a beautiful mental image for me to have, that the fact that the young person the self-confidence was coming out even in the way they move.
We really do see that. And I do want to emphasize that the majority of the youth who we are working with are not athletic. And in fact, youth who have been on this whole class of antipsychotics that have grown so much in popularity. A paper came out last year really detailing how the negative impacts on kids' metabolism due to the antipsychotic. It essentially makes kids pre-diabetic really rapidly. So it's common for us to have kids who are very overweight. They are not athletic. And so we are looking for that embodied peak experience on relatively flat ground. I tell my team, like, we're looking for the rock climbing horizontally, and you can do that almost anywhere. So we're looking for the log across the creek, the rock piles, the snowshoeing in deeper snow. Kayaking on a windy day does that too, but just anything that drops them into that flow state, that place where they're not thinking, they're doing, they're being, their present moment. It helps to have a little bit of risk, so that kind of, I could fall off this log, and sure, I'll hold their hand the first couple times and like, okay, like, try it. And so we're supporting them doing these physical challenges that give them that present moment experience. And I mentioned the neuroscience. There's a whole Dr. Ruth Lanius up in Western Ontario University has done many, many brain scans on. She's a neuroscientist, psychiatrist, and many brain scans on adults who had serious childhood trauma, complex trauma, or developmental trauma disorder, very typical of the kids we are treating. In these brain scans, they're showing consistent signatures where there are weak connections. And there's some growing theory that this consistent, repetitive activation of the vestibular, sensory motor, proprioceptive neurologic structures can strengthen those weak connections. And we see that. We'll have kids who, they come into our program, we start treating them, and their posture is just kind of submissive and worn out and beat by the world kind of posture, and shuffling their feet and not looking you in the eye. And after a few months of these weekly sessions, they're holding their head up, they're walking with confidence, their balance skills have improved, and that strongly correlates with behavioral change. Their ability to regulate emotionally, their ability to face setbacks and challenges, their relationships with their families, their ability to get through the school day. So we're actually excited to we're just writing up the IRB now for university support to do a research project to track that. So an array of video cameras where we can have the kids walk a course on video, a challenge, little bit of a challenge course, 1 month into treatment, 6 months into treatment, 1 year into treatment, and have a pool of people who are independent reviewers to assess these videos for the youth's kinetic qualities. And they won't know the history or how long they've been in treatment. And we are excited to see how that pans out. We're pretty confident. What our hypothesis is, we'll show a very strong correlation with embodied confidence improvements and behavioral change. And that could inform all sorts of, I could see therapists, putting slack lines in the office or running around on boulders in the side yard of the building before they sit down and talk, or, it could be all sorts of implications. And we're drawing on bodies of work that support this. Occupational therapy. Interesting is so many of these methods go to such great lengths to figure out what you can do in an office. And we're saying, it actually walk out the office, go across the street, bounce around in the creek. In urban areas, one of my favorite landscapes is the harbor sides, and all these harbors have these great rock pilings. And we'll walk, when I'm down there, I always do that for myself. I'll go running along the rock pilings, and there's seagulls and crabs. And I mean, you could do that in Brooklyn. You could do that up in London, there's, you don't have to be, in the high Sierra to do nature-based therapeutic work at all. There is great terrain almost anywhere.
I was thinking it must be quite something to witness a child turn their attention from very inward focused and wondering what's wrong with them to connecting and turning their focus out to to nature and the world around them, and to put their faith in you. I wondered how that makes you feel personally when you experience that.
I've been a guide for 40 years, so it's a familiar feeling for me. I would say that my staff, there's 18 of us therapeutic mentors. We're growing rapidly, but it's sad that the need is growing rapidly, and we're always managing a wait list. But we do not have high turnover in our workforce. People really love this work, and part of it is we don't burn them out. Like we want it to be a part-time, highly trained, highly supported, well-paid part-time job. These people are working with 2 or 3 kids, devoting a few afternoons a week to this work, and so they're also not burnt out or overwhelmed. But it is they love it, and definitely seeing the change in the kids and having that relationship is amazing. And I think another hallmark is that we are a lot less boundaried than the typical therapist. So we do get to know these families. We're bringing the kid home after dark, and we don't just, they don't jump out of our car. We go step into the living room and talk to the families. And we often really help. A lot of the wounding that happens with kids who have serious emotional disturbance is disconnection from their families, or, they're wearing out their families, or there's a lot of drama with their families. And we are there for the kids, but we're actually added capacity so we can give more family support. We have full-time social worker in-house now to do that, so that we can help the education that is really useful for parents to receive in supporting a kid like this. But we end up getting invited to, the younger sister's quinceanera, or, to family picnics, and we go, and we're also there in the middle of the night when something bad happens, and we'll go to the probation meeting, and we'll show up at the hospital. And it's very meaningful to be able to have that, not just be like, we're in a clinic 9 to 5 and it goes to an answering service if you have a problem on the weekend or at night. I would just say we have a more intimate connection to the whole family. We've been doing it long enough. We're having, we have wonderful encounters with kids coming home from college right now, this time of year, for winter break, and checking in on us, coming into the office saying hi, or they're stopping by with their mom, and they haven't been in treatment for 3 years, but they still are connected to us in that way. And it's very meaningful.
That theme of connection seems to run as a kind of central philosophy, I guess, through a great deal of what you do. And I was really interested to read your blog post about the life force, as you call it. And, I really kind of spoke to me. And, I think, trying to explain that to a young person, I I think is probably far more meaningful to them than talk of brain diseases and chemical imbalances and the other kind of things. So, I think that life force and connection, with nature, with family, with friends, with mentors, with coaches, whatever it might be, that struck me as quite powerful.
Yes, I would say the key is to the skillful way is to not explain it, but to get on your hands and knees with a young person and really look at that anthill or look at the leaf that the butterfly just left from and flew away. And we evolved to be really skilled at taking in the information from the incredibly rich sensorium of nature. That is how our brains evolved to be good at that, to recognize patterns and sounds and sights and smells and colors and movement. And it is so healthy to engage those structures in our brains and to be exposed to that. And there's a lot of growing research. It's a little bit laughable that you can get government grants to study that exercising outdoors is good for you. That's the world we're in today, though. It's funny and it's sad. But yes, the life force, when people are exposed to that. I mean, we in the springtime we take one-on-one, we put on waders and we go out in this lake and search for toad eggs, and it's amazing to wade around in half a meter of water and see mating toads and find big strings of toad eggs, and then come back 3 weeks later and see little tadpoles and then the toads and all of that. I'm a grandfather, and of course, it's nothing is more rich and fun than rooting around on the forest floor with my 2-year-old granddaughter or my 5-year-old grandson, and adolescence. It's a natural thing for little kids. What's happened in our society is that, maybe they do a field trip in 6th grade when they're 11 or 12, and then it stops. And so when you can take a 16-year-old who's had all this, history and challenge and difficulty and trauma and being traumatized by the system of care even, and kind of get back to that joyful place they were at as a 5-year-old exploring nature. It is healing. It's healing when you're 60 to do it. It really is. And we are part of life force. And anytime you can get on your hands and knees and encounter it or have it go whistling by your ear when you startled a bird in the thicket, it's an amazing thing. And it's an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it strikes me that, we as a society, we've probably inflated the gravity of mental health problems so much that we've probably then underplayed the value and the power of relatively simple, natural ways of dealing with those mental health problems. We probably have missed a trick in not doing more of what you're doing, which is saying, there are really good, powerful ways to influence those mental health problems that aren't medical and aren't medicines and aren't rooted in biology, but actually getting out and connecting with nature.
Connecting with nature and connecting with each other. And as I said, we are always triaging a wait list right now. And that's the hardest part of this work is, taking these calls from parents who are really under stress to support their young people. And our service is reserved for really the most serious cases. So we are, when a kid comes in, they've maybe had a hospitalization or been arrested or, just some kind of meltdown that was so serious that an intervention is absolutely has to happen. But I do get a lot of calls from parents with kids who are kind of quote unquote normal teenage issues, like, oh, they're smoking some pot and they're being oppositional and their grades are slipping and they all want to be in our program. And I'm like, well, it's very hard. But the counsel I give over the phone to these parents is like, imagine how we all lived a few thousand years ago. We were in these bands of 45 to 60 people, deeply interdependent and interconnected. And the adolescent brain evolved to be really good at connecting to other adults. There wasn't this like isolated nuclear family back then. There was The girls were supposed to go learn to forage and make baskets from other women in the tribe, and the boys were supposed to go learn their skills with other men. And that is how humans evolved. And so it sounds so simple, but in our modern society, we are not supporting that. And adolescents are so hungry to connect. And so a lot of my advice is for these parents to just really, the kid has to find what they can be passionate about, but just help expose them to all these opportunities to connect with other cool adults. The best parents in the world are not enough. Adolescents really are hungry to connect with other adults. And so, getting into creative programs or, sport programs, but also having free time. That's the other problem. So we are definitely, paying a lot of attention to this decline in resiliency it's a global problem, with young people in adolescence. And that is our advice. So it's connecting to nature, but also connecting to each other, and connecting adolescents, connecting to great adults who can give them support. An interesting thing we noticed, so we're in rural California, and there's kind of this bias that people think like, oh, it's, everything's better in rural areas and it's not like the big bad city. And actually it's the opposite, right? The drug addiction, suicide, depression, anxiety, in many of those cases is double the incidence statistically in rural areas in America than it is in the cities. And that makes sense to us. We work with urban youth too on outings, not daily, although we're being asked to open up down in the Bay Area in 2020. So we will be operating down there too. But yeah, if you're a teenager in West Oakland with some serious emotional disturbance and struggles, if you walk out the door, the statistical probability of being able to encounter a really cool adult is much higher. You can, on your block, find somebody to hang out with. If you're at the end of a dirt road living in a trailer with your alcoholic older relative, that's a pretty sad, isolated place, and to make the contrast stark. But it is humans. Fundamentally, we are cuddling monkeys and we are supposed to be connected. And our modern society has just created so much disconnection. And that's it's not just for kids, obviously. Like the suicide is spiking for people of my age group, of 30 to 60-year-old men in America, are lonely and disconnected. And a pill isn't going to fix that.
No, and I think unfortunately that disconnect goes as far now as the climate emergency and climate change, doesn't it? We have removed ourselves from the stewardship of nature so far that now we're causing hopefully not irreparable damage. But again, I think what you're doing is so important, because not only are you attending to the growing problem of mental distress in youth, but you're probably also sowing the seeds for the generation that are going to have to take on climate change and do something actually about it more than talk.
It is so true. It is. Kids going through our therapeutic method are also becoming more environmentally literate, and that is a good thing. And it's meaningful thing. Youth really need meaning and meaning making, and we love this hugely growing youth movement about climate change and absolutely and social activism too. So back to our method. So 4 roots for growing a human. Root number 1 is authentic relationship. Root number 2 is connecting to nature. Root number 3 is embodied peak experience that I've been describing. Root number 4 is helping others. And that meaning making, we see that as a kid. Some of it's a trajectory of age. Like the 10-year-old, we'll get them volunteering a little bit, but boy, that 16-year-old, when she says, hey, I need to start looking for a job, can you give me some coaching about that? And we set her up with a really cool volunteer gig. And all of a sudden, she goes from being the problem child to being a helper. And that is hugely healing. These kids connecting to community through service is a huge part of that. And it's a core of our treatment method is helping them connect to community through service. And yeah, that could be environmental service, climate change, social service, giving out food to homeless people. It's a super important part of our method. It's what teenagers want, adolescents want to have meaning in their life, to be part of something bigger. We all want that. And you're also right to point out that if people who suffer from mental illness could be said to just be like a percentage of the population that has a higher sensitivity, well, there's really, to get through the day with some of the environmental news that's out there, we learn to grow thick skin. So the more sensitive people we're all suffering from this. We're all suffering from, the disconnect, the huge illogic disconnect between, how our societies have organized our material existence and the relationship with the planet. Now, I help kids get excited about the opportunities there. I think this young generation gets to redesign everything about our material existence, how we do transportation and energy and food and housing. And so to me, it's an exciting opportunity, but you can also just get really sad about it. It absolutely contributes to the global increase in depression.
Thank you so much, Peter. And was there anything else that you would like to share with the listeners?
One thing that's very interesting about our method is it's a very efficient delivery system. And I think that's important. So we built a system where one licensed therapist can clinically supervise 5 therapeutic mentors who are each treating 2 or 3 youth. If you map that out on a spreadsheet, you could see that like one licensed therapist is overseeing like 80 hours of nature-based therapeutic mentoring for the highest need youth. So it's a very effective delivery system. And we are ambitious. We think this method should spread. And I'm 57 years old, and I have a lot of energy for my work, but I am hoping in the next year we are looking at 2 other locations. A county in the Bay Area is really inviting us in to pilot a program there, and the biggest city near to us is Reno in the next state, Nevada. But we're hoping to prove this in some other locations, and then really maybe to license the method in a much bigger context, like to a large healthcare company. So we think we're very excited about it. We think it is a potential model that really is worth spreading.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, reading the website and seeing the images and reading the blogs and things, it really does give me hope for the future that we can encourage the next generation to deal with some pretty significant challenges in their lives. And I hope that the method that you've pioneered is spread all over the world as quickly as possible, because we desperately need it, I think.
Well, thank you very much. And it's as I said, it means so much to me to be part of the Mad in America community. It's a great service that you all have created, and to spread great knowledge.
Well, I just want to thank Peter so much for taking the time to chat for the podcast. And if you'd like to know more about the work of the Gateway Mountain Center, you can visit the website sierraexperience.org. And also, as this is our last podcast of 2019, I want to say a huge thank you to you for listening and for being part of the Mad in America community. During 2019, we've released 33 podcast interviews featuring a range of subjects, and we've added new parenting and veterans issues to our science and psychology discussions. We intend on keeping on this path to bring you more interviews and discussions throughout 2020. So from us all at Mad in America, thank you for giving us our time and for listening. And until next time, take care. Thank you for listening to the Mad in America podcast. Visit madinamerica.com for more news, views, and updates.